things growing there. Strathcona Park is the main area of our mountains, and all the highest peaks are in this area here. But of course, there's mountains all through wherever you see white on this map. So there's a lifetime of exploration to be done. So when we go to the mountains, there really on Vancouver Island is virtually no roads. There are no roads to Alpine, and there's only one maybe paved road to subalpine, that's to Mount Washington. Other than that, it's all logging roads. So when we go on these hikes, we start out usually quite low, and we get to go through beautiful, beautiful forests if they're in parks. If they're not in parks, then we go through second growth forests or maybe just clear cuts. As we move up, we then get into the montane forest, which is just a transitional forest between the lowland and the subalpine. It usually consists of mountain hemlock and mixed Douglas fir and amabilis fir. But what this talk is going to be focusing on is these two zones here. Starting at around 12 to 1500 meters, we get into the subalpine, which is the transition between the montane forest and the alpine zone. And then just a little bit at the very top, we get into true alpine. So it's alpine and subalpine zones that I'm going to mostly be talking about this evening. So the highest mountain on the island is the Golden Hind. It's 2,200 meters. This is where I hope my ashes are spread when I depart this world, because being an island born and bred boy, this mountain is very significant and symbolic for me. And I did climb it in 2004, and I hope to go back a couple more times to climb it. It's not the easiest climb, but the route does take you along here, and then it goes up this snow face here, and then this is the easy bit. But just to let you know, it took us half an hour to climb just this piece here. So it's a real mountain, that's for sure. And so why do we go there? Of course, it's like going on a mountain holiday when you go to Vancouver Island's mountains. We escape our realities, but really what we do is we enter reality. The mountain world is kind of like a real world. It's a place where there's no weeds. You know, they say there's no internet, but the connection's much better. You know, all we do up there is essentially we hike long distances, and then when we're not hiking, we're resting. But resting can take many forms. It can be swimming in tarns. It can be exploring the flora. It can just be sitting around eating a nice meal. But it all allows us to wander around in these remote areas that you have all to yourself. They're very isolated, and there's no coronavirus up there. Anyway, here's a few shots of the ruggedness of Vancouver Island. You can see none of these mountains can be seen unless you actually go to them, which again is not as easy because a lot of the mountains are beyond the parks trails. So we go and we learn. Here's a nice picture of Mount McBride. If you look, or the picture taken from Mount McBride, our camp, just getting used to my cursor here, is right here. You can see those little tents right there. They're a little camp. And that's taken from the summit of Mount McBride, which is one of the higher summits on the island. And here's a beautiful shot of 9 peaks and Majora's Load. So there's so much to learn up there. And we just look at everything because we have time. Other than the plants, of course, Vancouver Island is an island, and so we have, you know, things have evolved in isolation and have developed into, in some cases, their own special subspecies, like the Vancouver Island white-tailed ptarmigan, which is very abundant. In fact, I was laying in my tent 2 nights ago, and a little family of them walked right past my tent, and I could just see their little feet walking past at the pull of my fly. It was the cutest thing. So Lagopus leucrus saxatilis, which is such a great name. Saxatilis means of the rocks. And that's exactly what this bird, in fact, it looks like a rock. It's really hard to see. They barely move. That's how they camouflage. And if they weren't always squawking, you'd never see them. We also have the Vancouver Island marmot, who's kind of a celebrity these days. And I've been very lucky to see these guys 2 times in my life, but they're very, very extremely rare. And in decline, of course, even though there are efforts to revive them. So, but the main things we do when we're out there is we just have a good time with the plants. You know, this is AB's Lasiocarpa, which is the subalpine fir. This is supposed to be a tree that, you know, in some places gets quite tall, but up on the mountain ridges, it just grows like a flat pancake. And these are the types of interesting things that we like to look at when we're up in the mountains. So I did mention not my introduction, but in the write-up for this, that all you needed was a sense of adventure. But I neglected to mention you do need a few other things. You need experience in navigation, because you generally are off trail on these trips. And back, you know, up until about 10 years ago, we were still using the good old map and compass. But now we use GPS, and believe it or not, even the phone apps are good enough for getting yourself around, as long as you got a spare battery pack. So there's that. You also have to have a certain level of physical fitness, a tolerance for mosquitoes, if you don't mind getting wet. There's lots of other little criteria. You know, some good lightweight gear is never a bad thing. So all in all, if you really want to go to the mountains, you can, but don't get lost. People do get lost up there, and you know, sometimes we get turned around, but I can tell you we never really get lost, and that's because we do our homework before we go. Okay, so that's enough of the intro. Now I just want to get on with the flowers. So this is a talk about the flowers more than anything. I've just given you a little summary of what it's like to be up in the mountains, but now we're going to get to the fun stuff. So I'm breaking this into basically 5 sections. We're going to do alpine, subalpine, and then we're going to do heath flowers, which is a section of the subalpine, and then a section on limestone, and then a section on rarities and uncommon plants. So alpine habitats, this is the first one. So this is where rock gardeners have traditionally looked to for their plant palettes. A lot of rock gardening started from people in the mountains or exploring the mountains. So these are the highest ridges, the places where the snow typically gets blown off of very quickly. And it really is a different ecosystem than what you would see kind of at the base of the mountains. So let's go through some of the things you see way up on the very tops. So this is, I'm going to start off with the classic, the absolute classic, Silene acaulis, the moss campion. This is circumpolar, so it actually grows all over the northern hemisphere. It's called an Arctic alpine. So unlike some alpines, which might be restricted to their own particular mountain ranges, this is a plant that is in the mountains at southern latitudes and would be growing at sea level up in, you know, kind of Baffin Island and stuff. So it's an Arctic alpine. And it really is one of the most beautiful of all our alpines. It's incredibly tight cushion. When it's growing in nature, it tends to be covered in flowers a lot of the time. I did grow it from seed. And here's one that I took this spring, this summer. This is in my garden right now. I'm so proud of this because I collected the seed on Mount Albert Edward on Vancouver Island. Not flowering amazingly like they do in the hills, but still, it is growable, I guess you could say. And I should also mention that there's a white form as well, if you are so lucky to come across it. Everybody likes those rare white forms of things, right? Next up for our high alpine flora is the Phacelia sericea, or the silky Phacelia. This is one of the most stunning flowers you could possibly imagine. Not only the flowers, the leaves are this silky kind of finely cut little things, but the flowers themselves have these filaments that stick out, and you can see the little yellow anthers at the end of the filaments, making it almost look a bit like a bottle brush flower. Absolutely incredible little thing, and is growable in gardens with some practice. Next, for the high alpine stuff, remember these plants are dwarf. They're the shortest little things you can imagine. They got to stay out of the wind up there. So Penstemon davidsonii is another plant of our mountains. So one of a couple penstemons that grow up there. Just a gorgeous thing. Also comes in white, and also is everywhere. I've rooted this from cuttings a million times. grows very easily from cuttings. It does have a bit of a habit of losing whole branches in a trough or a rock garden. But a few years ago, we found this one growing at a very low elevation on Kennedy Lake. What's interesting is a lot of alpines, they come down the rivers. The seeds must get washed down the rivers, because you'll see a lot of these plants growing in the sand and gravel at low elevations. And so we found this one on Kennedy Lake, which must have been no more than a few meters above sea level. And sure enough, it has done amazingly in cultivation. This one's in Cam Kidd's garden, and we have a couple more in a couple other gardens, and they're just doing beautifully. They are not dying back at all, and they're getting bigger and bigger all the time. So it seems that this low elevation form may be better suited to our gardens. Saxifraga bronchialis. This is kind of like one of the closest ones we have to these European porophyllum saxifrages. You can see it makes a really tight bun. And then it's got these nice white flowers that come out. It's called the spotted saxifrage because it's got little spots on the petals. But what's really neat about it is that when it gets cold, the rosettes turn this beautiful red color. And this is up on Mount Whymper, and just a gorgeous thing. Again, grown from cuttings, no problem, as long as you can grow saxes okay. So this is a great little plant. I love how there's so many dwarf versions of our common garden plants. You just got to go up to these extreme environments to find them. So here you have northern goldenrod, Solidago multiradiata. This is a picture from the wild, but the plant in my garden actually looks better than the wild plants. It's one of the few that actually does better down here in my experience than it does up there. And it's a beautiful little thing. This is, you know, maybe 3-4 inches high. It's a goldenrod. Go figure. Micranthes tolmii is another one that used to be called Saxifraga tolmii. I have to say, I actually gave this talk about 10 years ago to the Qualicum Beach Club, and I think I had to change about 12 names. I've stuck with the new names for the most part. And I know gardeners don't like new names, but the botanists say that once the new names are accepted, everything will fit into its own little place perfectly. But it is very confusing for us amateur botanists who are trying to put names on things. Here's one that didn't change, partridge foot. This is a rose family plant. Again, high alpine, just grows very, very low, ferny kind of mat with these beautiful rosy flowers. And the mat itself is no more than 2 centimeters high, and the flowers themselves stick up about 3 or 4 inches or so. And then the common harebell. This is Campanula rotundifolia, which is also circumpolar. So this is what the Scottish call the bluebells of Scotland. When I was in Scotland and fishing on the riverbank, I saw this plant absolutely everywhere, and then I was surprised to find out that it was the same species that grows here in our mountains. A lot of these plants don't only grow in the mountains. If you go to the Souk River, you'll see this growing on the riverbanks. So a lot of these plants, they go all the way from sea level right up to alpine. Romanzophia stitchensis, or the Sitka mist maiden. This is a beautiful little plant that I have to say, when I'm hiking in the mountains and I miss my family, I have a flower symbol for each person in my family. And this is the one that represents my daughter. And the reason for that was because the petals reminded me of her cheeks when she was a little baby. She had these little rounded cheeks. And so this is what makes me think of my daughter when I'm in the mountains, Romanzophia stitchensis. So that is, let's go back there just to sum up. There's a few selections from high alpine spots and like places where snow sits and are very shaded and very extreme. You know, maybe don't get uncovered by snow very much. So the next area we're going to look at is the subalpine habitat. So moving down from those high ridges, you get down to where there's a little more soil, the ground is a little more flat and a little less exposed. So this is kind of like the herbaceous border of the alpine garden. It's not the little buns and carpets, it's more like the taller things that you'd find in the herbaceous border. can everybody see me? It's getting dark in my room here. I can almost barely see my computer. Should I turn my light on? I can see you, Donna. Should I turn my light on? Thumbs up. Can you see me okay? Turn my light on? Okay, just a second. Okay, is that better? Okay. I can't hear anyone or anything, so I'm just going to keep on going. Is that better or worse? Donna, can you... Better? Okay. All right. Subalpine habitats. As you can see here, we have Aquilegia formosa growing here. It blooms at sea level in May. And so this is the red one, the columbine, right? So I always feel like if you just want to follow the spring, just go up into the mountains. And if you missed it blooming in May, then you can go see it blooming in August up in the subalpine meadows. And here's another combination with mountain arnica. So in the subalpine, I should mention here that a lot of our mountains are volcanic rocks, very hard, poorly drained, and they don't create very rich soils. And along with that poor drainage comes a lot of bog conditions. So you get a lot of bogs mixed in with the subalpine. And here is this classic orchid, the white bog orchid. This was up on Mount 5040 just this summer, Platanthera dilatata. Just an incredible colony of them here. Okay, so this is Erigeron peregrinus, the subalpine daisy. This is another one of the classic meadow plants of the alpine. It's kind of anywhere that you see a meadow, right? Absolutely just a glorious when you see it by the thousands. And then along with that plant with Erigeron, you often see Arnica latifolia, the mountain arnica. This is another one that's a little bit confusing to me because I haven't really been able to figure out the different arnicas. They are fairly confusing. There's quite a few of them, and a lot of them look pretty similar. So, but the one that you see en masse in the meadows, I believe is this mountain arnica, and here it is on Mount Septimus in Strathcona Park, growing in the meadow. We have 4 different erythroniums on Vancouver Island. 2 of them are alpines. One of them is Erythronium grandiflorum. It's not super common on the alpine, but it is, you do find it here and there. It's on Mount Arrowsmith and it's on Mount 5040. But it's an absolutely gorgeous little thing. And it grows in avalanche tracks and also in meadows, and it can be seen by the thousands in some places. Not so much on Vancouver Island that I've seen, but certainly in the interior. This is the erythronium with the widest range of all erythroniums, and they go all the way down to Colorado, and I'm not sure how far north, but I would imagine they go fairly far. Caltha leptocephala. For anyone that knows the European Caltha palustris, which is a fairly common pond plant in gardens, here's a cute little dwarf version of it. And the white mountain marsh marigold. Of course, it grows, the name implies that it pretty much grows in marshes and running water and all these things, which I personally, with a drier garden, have never had a lot of success with. But my friend Chad, I asked him the other day, he's really into bog gardens and watery type gardens. He said it grows too well for him. So this goes to show, give them the right conditions and maybe they'll become weeds, right? The other penstemon, so the first one we looked at was Penstemon davidsonii. This one is the coast penstemon, Penstemon cerulatus. So penstemons are strictly North American, Western North American genus that range from the coast here to the interior, but they're really more dryland plants, and their center of distribution is really in the Great Basin down in the States, where it's just hot and dry. But we have this one here that makes its way out as far west as any other penstemon, the coast penstemon. And this plant grows so well in gardens. It's just, it self-sows in my garden. I've certainly seen it in many, many gardens. The native plant people have it and stuff. So this is definitely a good one if you want an easy native plant. Keep in mind though, it's not like an alpine. It's more of like a herbaceous plant. In the garden, it gets about 1.5 to 2 feet, I'd say. And it's called cerulatus because the leaves of it are serrated. If you see here, if you can, it's not a great shot, but you can just see this curled leaf. It's got a little bit of serration to it. There's a couple of lupins. None of them are the real high, super choice dwarf ones on the island, but we have one called the Arctic lupin, which is quite nice. But the real showstopper for me is this one, Lupinus nootkatensis. This is more of a north latitude and real snowy, kind of wetter place lupin, and it's nice in flower, but when it's in bud is really when it shines. Every single part of the plant is hairy, and just look at this thing. It's just incredible. When we're up on Mount 5040 this summer, they were in various stages of growth, and there was lots and lots to look at. It's just one of those amazing things. Lupinus nootkatensis. Anemone occidentalis. This is basically our local version of pulsatilla, the garden pulsatillas. We have the prairie crocus that grows in the interior, and out here we have Anemone occidentalis, which sometimes is called hippie on a stick, because when they go to seed, they have these long shaggy hairdos. And this one here, I have to say, it looks more like a punk rocker on a stick because it's got more of a spiky hairdo. But as they get older, they have these big flowy hairdos. And this is the flower that most reminded me of my son when he was a young boy, because he had the big long flowy hair too. So I always have to have little memories of the family when I'm out hiking. Everybody knows globe flower in the garden. They're usually those yellow ones. Well, lo and behold, we have our own native globe flower here too. Trollius albiflorus is a little dwarf, maybe just grows maybe 6-8 inches high, and but it grows in meadows. Here it is in marble meadows. I've never tried to grow it, but I actually did get some seed this weekend, so maybe we'll give it a shot. I would assume like other Trollius and ranunculus, it likes pretty good moist conditions. So ask me in a year or two. Okay, so that was the subalpine herbaceous flora. The next we're going to get into is the subalpine heath. Now, I mentioned that most of our mountains are volcanic, and the rocks are hard and they don't drain very well, and they're not very limey. They're more acidic. And so this is why probably, I don't know, 80% of that subalpine terrain that you're walking on is the heath. And so what you see here is actually heather. This is kind of like our version of the Scottish moors, you might say. This picture was taken just 2 days ago. And it really is so beautiful. It's like open parkland, right? So it's, like I said, it's that transition zone between the alpine and the montane forest. And so you get this, some of it's forested, some of it's open, but all of the in-between bits is predominantly ericaceous shrubbery. Here's our camp 2 nights ago. And the reason I wanted to show this was A, because it's on a heath, but B, right where I'm standing, the classic thing happened. It's not flower related, but we went to bed, and the next morning there was the biggest pile of bear scat about 20 feet from this tent. And I won't show you the picture of it, but it was filled with blueberries. And it was just, that's never actually happened to us before. We don't really fear bears up there because they're really not ever an issue. And this proved it. It must have walked up to our camp, saw we were there, left its mark, and went away. We don't know if it was in the evening or in the morning, but whatever the case. So the predominant shrubs of the heath are heathers, and there's actually 3 different heathers, but there's 2 dominant ones. Phyllodesae and petriformis, or the pink mountain heather. When the heath is in bloom, this can actually be carpets of the stuff. And so kind of like in Scotland, when the heathers bloom there, it's just a carpet of pink. This is a carpet of pink on Vancouver Island's Alpine. And then the other one is cassiope. And this is a plant that I know certainly in wetter climate gardens, they grow this like crazy. It's funny, you really don't see it around Victoria too much, although it's just an incredible little thing. I don't know if people grow mertensiana, but there are certainly other species of cassiope that get grown. And this is the other one, the white mountain heather that you see mixed in with the pink mountain heather all the time. Rhododendrons. We have, I think, 3 species of rhododendrons on Vancouver Island now after name changes. But the real showstopper of the subalpine heath is Rhododendron albiflorum, the white flowered rhododendron. And so it grows about maybe 6 feet, 5-6 feet tall on average. And if you catch it right, you get these beautiful white rhododendron flowers. Norm Todd personally told me that it's impossible to grow, but I've also heard that people have been able to grow it. So I'd like to know. I've personally never tried. Here's one that kind of goes more with the bog edge type things, but like I said, bogs and subalpine heaths do kind of mingle a lot up there. And that's Kalmia microphylla. And sometimes in the Alpine, you get these absolutely minuscule ones because usually they're up about maybe a foot tall. These ones were about 2 inches tall, just the cutest little things. So these are all ericaceous plants that are a result of the Alpine heath. And of course, the one plant you cannot ignore up there because it also forms the majority of the ground cover are the blueberries. Here's Vaccinium ovalifolium, which we ate a ton of this year or this last trip. And Vaccinium deliciosum, the aptly named Vaccinium deliciosum. And now that is provided that that's what this is. There are so many different vacciniums up there, and a lot of them are kind of hard to tell exactly. This is my best guess, Vaccinium deliciosum. And they're very deliciosum. And then the best thing about the heath is in the fall, when you go up there, that's where you get the best fall color of anywhere on Vancouver Island. I always feel like we get a bit ripped off here with our oaks. They just turn brown, and we just have so many conifer. We just don't have the great fall show. But if you want it, you just go up to the Alpine, and as long as you don't mind the frosty mornings, you get these incredible displays where it just looks like the ground's on fire. Okay, so now my favorite part of the mountains. Unfortunately, they're just a tiny part, but we have a unique situation here where exposed limestone exists above the tree line. And so unlike most limestone on the island, it's all covered with forests. You can't really see it. The Alpine limestone is like a moonscape, and it comes with the most incredible rock formations. It's a karst landscape. It's sinkholes. It's knife-edged blades of treachery. Quite frankly, I mean, if you don't have the strongest leather boots, these things will just chop your feet right up. And heaven forbid you'd ever want to slip on any of this stuff. It's just absolutely incredible. So it comes with all the karst features. As you can see, it's very moonscapey. It's a huge inspiration for crevice gardens that we build. And it's all, I mean, that looks like the biggest crevice garden in the entire world. This is on limestone cap. And it's all from limestone, which is a shallow ocean sediments that have been built up, corals and seashells and things that have then been thrust up in, higher than 6,000 feet on the island here. And of course, we also have these terrifying sinkholes. Some of them you can climb into. Other ones are best safe for cavers, and they actually, of course, have to rappel down into them. But here's one of the biggies up on Clayoquot Plateau. Just terrifying, even just to walk up close to the edge of them. But it's hard camping up there. There's not a lot of flat places, and there's no water because limestone is very porous, and the water just drains away. So if you're camping there in the summertime, it has to be snow melting. As you can see here, this is a spot we found after dark because we just didn't know where to sleep. But it was a perfect little square of flatness, as you can see. This is a few years ago now. But you can see we're melting snow here for our water. And it was this is about a 300-foot drop right here. But it was actually quite a nice little comfortable night up there in the Clayoquot Plateau. So just a few of the areas. One of the best you could possibly go to is Marble Meadows and Limestone Cap. I've been lucky enough to go there. I think I've been there about 5 times in my life now. Here's a Google Earth image of limestone cap. It's probably about 1 kilometer to 1.5 kilometers across this plateau, basically. When we go there, we would typically camp in this little pass. It's called Rainbow Pass. There's a little lake there. And then you can just spend the day exploring. It's easily good for a day or two, just walking around up here. And what happens on the limestone is because you have a higher pH, there's all this calcium and magnesium, it hosts a richer flora. The same thing happens in lower elevations, you know, like in old growth forests and things. You seem to have more productive ecosystems underneath limestone or growing on top of limestone. When you step off of the volcanics in the Alpine and onto the limestone, you notice an incredible instant difference. So here's a picture Hans took of Shane and I up on Limestone Cap. I mean, just look at this beautiful place. The mountains in the background, just the most gorgeous. We spent a day and a half just wandering around up here, essentially, just taking pictures. And this is where we found this life achievement plant, I guess you might say. Almost impossible to see it in bloom because it blooms so early. But this year, the snowpack was so high that we were actually able to find 1 or 2 plants that are in flower. And this is probably one of the choicest of all alpines that grows on the island, the purple mountain saxifrage, which is well known to rock gardeners because it's also an Arctic alpine circumpolar. It grows all over. It grows on Iceland. It grows in the Alps. It grows in the American Rockies. It grows all over the place. Of course, it exists in different forms all over the place. From what I can tell, our form is the nicest. It's the tightest. It's the most congested. And when we found this, we were just jumping for joy. It was one of the most amazing things, and whether we'll ever see it in bloom again, I don't know. Anyway, so more limestone associated plants. Again, these aren't exclusive to limestone, but when you get on the limestone, they become a lot more prolific. So Phlox diffusa, Phlox is another another North American genus. And here in the mountains of Vancouver Island, we have this one species and its various color forms. Everybody knows Phlox subulata from the gardens. This is just kind of like our own little choice little version. It comes in white, it comes in purple, it comes in these picoty kind of white centered with purple edges, and just, it's almost impossible to not photograph it when you walk past it. It's not known to be that easy in cultivation. This is a little trough I had 3-year-old plants, and this was the best I got, and then they died. I've had people from England tell me that they've tried it and they can never seem to keep it going. I don't know what the secret is, but maybe a different form or something. I know Fraser's Thimbles has one that Chris Dixon grows in his garden that gets huge. So maybe from different places you can get different, have different success. But the ones on the island here is definitely a tricky one, or an alpine house plant. Dryastromondiae, the yellow mountain avens. This is a plant that is so common in the Rockies, but on Vancouver Island, it is almost not seen ever. But if you do go on the limestone, you will see it here and there if you're really lucky. In Calgary or out in the Rockies, I saw it growing by the acre along creek beds, stream banks, but that doesn't happen here. Clayoquot Plateau is another incredible area. This is on the way to Tofino. This cloud bank here, that would be Highway 4 down in that valley. So that's the route to Tofino, but you don't see any of this stuff from that highway. You maybe see a couple of mountains and that's it. One of the mountains that you don't see is Steamboat Mountain. You see a bit of it actually from the highway, but as you can see, all the rock here is this limestone, kind of gray colored stuff. And what you don't see is that this is just nothing but flowers all around us. This was a little bivouac camp we had a few years ago. You can see here's the terrain. This is Steamboat. Clayoquot Plateau is this whole area across here. Oh, sorry, you don't see my Clayoquot Plateau is all of this stuff over here. So on this trip, we came down and we camped in between these two lakes, and then we explored the plateau. One plant that you see almost exclusively on limestone is the Arctic willow, Salix arctica. This is a great little ground-hugging willow. You know, maybe grows, the biggest ones seem to be maybe a couple meters spread. But we have brought this down into cultivation, and I have it in a couple gardens. It's looking great. I have, you know, 5-year-old plants in gardens with nice thick stems on them. Here's the flowers. Beautiful. So one of the best trips I did was with Hans Romer and Ryan Batten. That's him here that you can see. This was to a very remote area called the upper, well, I would call it the Upper Wolf River Limestone. It was Hans's idea to go here, of course, because he wanted to see if there was something there that had never been found before. Here's another Google Earth shot. So this is the Golden Hind here. So the highest on the island. The summit is actually here. But the limestone area that we explored is this chunk down here. And again, it's probably a good kilometer across, plus a bunch of other stuff that's attached to it. And here's Hans hiking down to our first camp. And so all the limestone is all of this stuff you see here, and then it continues on, and you can see there's this hump here. Here it is. So you can see this gorgeous, gorgeous plateau. There's the highest mountain on the island, just as a backdrop. Can you imagine this place? Guaranteed to not see any people, because it was something in the neighborhood of 16 kilometers bushwhack to get here. So there was no other way, because they're not allowed to helicopter you into the park. So we spent a couple days up here just exploring. Just look at this incredible cedar. That's all stratified like limestone. You can see the lines in it here. It hasn't been tilted for whatever reason. And so some of the plants you see up there, Saxifraga cespitosa. This is a picture of a plant not growing on limestone, but you often do see it on limestone. I don't know why that went there. So this is a saxifrage. Also, I believe it's also circumpolar, or it's at least Arctic Alpine. And sorry about that. And this does grow in gardens too. I have one in my garden. Although I should say the form that I have is the one from Mount Wells, which is a subspecies. But still, it's quite a nice little thing. Here's another plant that's only on limestone on Vancouver Island, but if you go to the Rockies, it's everywhere. In fact, in Banff, I rode my bike past it on a trail in a city park, which I thought was kind of, not Banff, sorry, Calgary. So I thought, oh boy, this plant is impossible to see on the island, but here in Calgary, all you have to do is get on your bike and go for a bike ride. Anyway, it's a neat little thing. And when it goes to seed, it has these nice little ornamental seed heads. And then another anemone, this is the cutest little anemone, the anemone parviflora, this small flowered anemone. Again, only grows on limestone, and it's much shorter than the other ones, just a couple inches tall. Just what's the quaintest little thing you've ever seen. And I think one last limestone plant. This is one that has a relatively limited distribution. It's on Vancouver Island and a little bit in the Coast Ranges, maybe in the Cascades. Hedysarum occidentale, Western sweet vetch, and it grows in with the kind of herbaceous stuff in the limestone. So that takes care of 4 different areas of that you might encounter when you're up in the mountains. And now I'm just going to go over some of the rare or uncommon plants on Vancouver Island. So there's this one, the Olympic mountain onion. As the name implies, it's from the Olympics. Sorry, it keeps changing there. It does grow in Vancouver Island, but it's very uncommon here. You do see it on the Lake Cowichan Mountains, north of Lake Cowichan, along with a bunch of other Olympic mountain species that for some reason occur there. Here's another one that changed its name. It used to be called Aster pausicapitatus. It's now called Eucephalus pausicapitatus, which is new to me as of a week ago. Fairly common in the Olympics, fairly uncommon on Vancouver Island. However, I did find an entire meadow of it on Mount Septimus, growing on the moraine. So In some places it can be quite prolific, but this is the only place I've ever seen it grow like this, that's for sure. Here's a plant I've only ever encountered once on Vancouver Island because it is very uncommon, but again, not uncommon in the Olympics and elsewhere. The American sawwort, Sassoria americana. It's herbaceous, so it grows, up to kind of two feet tall, grows in the kind of real meadowy kind of herbaceous meadows along with those kind of arnicas and lupins and things. And it's in the sunflower family, sawwort. Here's a neat little thing that also it's not endemic to the island. I don't know if there is actually anything that's endemic to the island. We have our subspecies, but well, actually there are, but not in the Alpine, I don't think. Erysimum arenicola, the sand-dwelling wallflower. Isn't that just a beautiful thing? It's just like a garden wallflower, except it's nice and dwarf. And I believe this is a subspecies on the island that may creep off the island a little bit. Here's a photo of Hans's. This is another plant that is common on the Olympics. And as far as people know, it only occurs on one mountain on Vancouver Island, and that is Orthocarpus imbricatus, the mountain owl clover. It's kind of like a castanea, although it's an annual. Like I say, in the Olympic meadows, it's everywhere. But here on the island, it's only in one place. Oh, and the place that it grows is called Marmot Mountain. Another plant that I've only ever seen in one place on Vancouver Island, although it grows in abundance pretty much all over North America. Everybody knows about death camas. It used to be called Zygodanus, the one that grows down here in the Gary Oak areas. Well, there's a mountain one called the mountain death camas. They both recently had name changes, and they're both now in totally different genera. But now this one's called, it used to be called Zygodanus elegans, I believe. Now it's called Anticlea elegans. And it really is elegant. And you can kind of see by the flower shape that it maybe does deserve to be separated from what Zygodanus used to be, which is now Toxicoscordium or something. But here's a nice close-up of the flower. Quite a beautiful thing. And we had no idea what this was until we got home and had to ask people. So Louisias are a very classic rock garden plant. And on Vancouver Island, we have 3 different Louisias that occur naturally. The most garden-worthy one is this one, Louisia columbiana variety rupicola. Now, Louisia columbiana grows off the island, and it is an inferior plant compared to this one. Variety rupicola, it also occurs off the island, but it's the only Columbiana that grows on Vancouver Island. And so it's much more congested. The rosettes are much finer and much tighter. The only thing is the flower color isn't as spectacular as the mainland forms, which tends to be more of a rose. We have white flowers with pink lines in them. But still, if you like Louisias, it's a charming little thing. This I grew from seed this year and have had great success. Maybe next year I'll have some at the plant sale. Another name change, used to be Mimulus louisii. It's now Erianthe louisii, the purple monkey flower, named after Lewis from Lewis and Clark. And it grows on stream sides and in moist meadow areas. And then there's another one that used to be Mimulus, but this is Erianthe tilingi, which also it looks a lot like our low elevation Mimulus guttatus, except that the plant itself is much larger. Again, it grows along stream banks. Like all Mimulus, they tend to like moist kind of seepy areas and stream banks. But it's always fun to come across it when you're in the wild. Douglasia levigata is now had its name changed to Androzatse levigata, which makes me sad because this is the only Douglasia that grew on Vancouver Island, and it's named after my hero, David Douglas. So I don't know if they've changed all the different Douglasias to Androzatse, but if they have, then where's Douglas's plant gonna go? Where's his name gonna be? Anyway, this is, again, very common in the Olympics, not so common on Vancouver Island. I took cuttings of it. They rooted like crazy. And I personally haven't been able to grow it, but I haven't tried hard enough. Chris Dixon grew it in tufa and he has succeeded beautifully. So very growable as long as you give it that real choice Alpine treatment. One that you don't see too often, and it grows on the highest summits, but it also goes right down to sea level. But it always seems to be growing in harsh conditions, is the villous cinquefoil, or the hairy cinquefoil, Potentilla villosa, rose family. This is on the summit of Kings Peak. Here's a little neat one named after the Salish, Erigeron salisii. Again, not completely endemic to Vancouver Island because it does occur in the Cascades. But it looks a lot like another plant called Erigeron compositus, which I just assumed that's what it was for many years until I started looking more carefully. And now I find Erigeron salisii on almost every single mountain I climb on Vancouver Island. And I found it just this weekend too on Shepherd's Cone. And it is just the quaintest little fleabane you could imagine. It grows in the highest, most exposed rocky summits you could possibly imagine. Oh, I should also mention that I have taken cuttings, they've grown great, and I have it growing in a pot. And it looks just as good in the pot as it does in the mountains. Maybe even better. Kalmia procumbens used to be Lozularia procumbens, another ericaceous plant commonly known as the Alpine azalea. Can you imagine a more choice looking thing? It's only about an inch tall. It grows incredibly slowly. Wikipedia says that it's easily grown, but I don't think it's true. I've never had any success. My friend who grows a lot of bog plants has managed to keep it alive. And I did see it actually in the Edinburgh Botanic Garden when I was there. Of course, they have a much wetter climate. So maybe that's the secret. Another plant that used to be called an aster, which is very rare on the island, is the Siberian aster. So this is another, or the Arctic aster, another Arctic alpine that, you know, we're more at the southern end of its range here than anything, and it would be moving north. The Arctic aster. A couple more left here. I said there's no weeds in the Alpine, which is one of the best reasons to go up there. But we do have a native dandelion. It's variable, so there's different sizes, but this one is the smallest one I've ever found. That's my Swiss Army knife there. And I carry a Swiss Army knife called the Camper. So it's one of the smaller ones. So you can imagine how tiny this little dandelion is. Pretty cute, huh? I can't mention our flora without talking very briefly about one plant that occurs on the San Juan Ridge. San Juan Ridge is the closest of any of these areas, and it is actually slightly accessible. And maybe we can do another field trip up there, but it's a bog ecosystem. And along with that, it also hosts Erythronium montanum, which is the only place on the island that it grows. It's just on that one ridge and maybe one adjacent ridge. If you go to the Olympics, there is absolute carpets of this plant. And on Vancouver Island, it's only in one place. But where it grows, there's a lot. When it blooms, it can look like the ground is almost covered in snow because they're so prolific. And I'm saving the best for last here. I didn't believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. Cypripedium montanum grows on Vancouver Island. It's known as more of an interior, well, it's not known as, it is an interior species. Grows from the Cascades to the Rockies and who knows where else. But in 1994, it was discovered by a caver in a place called White Ridge. And I found out about it maybe 15 years ago, but I never really believed it. Something part of me just was like, it's not possible. Anyway, this summer we made it up there and we found it. It's maybe 2 or 3 little pockets, maybe 200 plants, and that's it. And it grows in limestone. White Ridge it's named White Ridge because it's a limestone, it's an exposed limestone ridge. And to find this, we actually tracked down the collector whose name was in the herbarium specimen. His name was Frank Horvath. And he lives in Courtenay now, and we got in contact with him. And the only way we were able to find this was because we had cell reception on White Ridge. We were actually phoning him for exact directions from the ridge. And after 2 days of searching, we didn't know it was about 30 minutes from our camp. It took us 2 days to find it. But it was also down this really scary slope, and you had to take this one very nasty step to get to it. But we got to it, and there it is. How did it get there? Like hundreds of kilometers from the nearest one. How did it get there? Anyway, that wraps up my little tour of Vancouver Island's alpine flora. So I'm just going to leave you now with a little 3-minute musical slideshow, and then maybe after that we can maybe do questions. But this slideshow is pictures and landscape photos of Vancouver Island, but it also is what's called the 10 Commandments of the Flowers. Now, Phyllis Munday was a great Vancouver mountaineer. She died in the 80s. And her husband, Don, were flower enthusiasts and mountaineers. And they wrote a wildflower book in the 50s. And in that book, she professed the 10 Commandments of the Flowers. That's it. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can we open for questions? I can't hear anybody. Oh, hi guys.
Did you do that?
No, she didn't.
Oh.
Okay, hey Donna, can you hear me?
Yes, I've asked everybody to unmute.
Okay.
We've done that.
Yeah,
we had-
Mel,
Have we had some
McLeod,
newcomers since the beginning then?
Agnes,
Yeah.
Hans Romer.
Oh, Justin, you're there. Hey.
I'm here.
Yay.
All right.
Fabulous, Paul. Absolutely fabulous.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Very good.
So much.
Thank
That
you,
was really
Paul.
great.
So does anyone have any questions at all or?